article out of Science Newsline. University of Michigan has put this report out. Researchers inject nanofiber spheres carrying cells into wounds to grow tissue. And the system is a nanotech tissue growth system that is little strands, and researching it, it looks exactly like and behaves exactly like Morgellons, little strings that then form balls that then other little metastasizing strings grow out of. And it uses the energy in the tissue, it uses the vitamins and minerals and oxygen to grow. And then I think back to just News 8 Austin just a few weeks ago, here in Austin with the Morgellons conference that I meant to go to, but I just didn't have time, interviewing medical doctor after medical doctor going, we believe it's a form of nanotech. It grows, it forms these spheres and then grows. And then here it is, University of Michigan. Folks, there's all these companies developing this stuff. What do you think happens when you have thousands of biotech companies all over the world? Open air planting, part insect, part plant, part mammal, part insect, part fish, part insect. I mean, there are hundreds of different GMO salmon that are part insect, part human, cows that are part human that produce human milk, BBC, goats that are part human, chimpanzees that are part human, and this is all news. And I know yuppies are driving along that only know about the Final Four and all this, or about baseball season and the Rangers beating the Yankees, and they're like, this guy's crazy, Marge. He's talking about part spider, part human. Look, if you won't Google goats that are part human,
this farm is located outside Montreal, Canada. These are very special goats. Within their genetic makeup is one spider silk gene.
In a spider, the gene is responsible for the making of so-called dragline silk, the strongest natural fiber known to science. Dragline is the silk favored for the radii of the web and to suspend from. It's a spider's lifeline. How do you get the gene into the goat? You start with the embryo, or fertilized egg.
What we do is we take a very fine glass pipette and we add just a few copies of the gene into this fertilized goat egg. What happens then, when the goat egg is a single cell, is that the spider silk gene becomes part of one of the chromosomes.
They do produce highly prized dragline silk protein. How do you get the protein out of the goat? You milk it.
The goats produce silk within their mammary gland. Inside their mammary gland is a single spider silk gene, and the goat's genetic information, having this added gene, allows them to produce silk protein in their milk.
Refined out of the milk, the protein yields a syrupy material called spin dope.
This golden solution is very much like you would see inside a spider if you could look inside her silk glands.
Then comes the real challenge, making a super strong fiber out of spin dope. As we've seen, a spider does it by spurting a protein solution through her spinnerets.
And as they line up, then the individual crystalline segments in each of the proteins actually snaps into a lock, just like Legos would. And that actually then binds all the proteins together and occurs very, very rapidly.
Tiny holes in a stainless steel plate become man-made spinnerets.
This mimics or biomimics what is happening in the spider. And as the silk proteins move through the tiny hole, they touch each other, they nucleate, and they form continuous filaments, several miles long, in fact, as long as we'd like to have them.
So far, this is the weakest link in the technology. Artificial spinnerets have only been able to replicate a strand 1/10 the strength of a spider's dragline. The eight-legged web slingers have the advantage. For now.
I remember the Washington Post 9 years ago said, well, the laboratories won't allow people to see it. And a few years later, I even read the article on Ian Punnett's show on Coast to Coast. He had trouble believing it until he pulled it up. And it said, but yes, down in Costa Rica, there's some of the labs, and they have part chimpanzee, part human creatures. But they won't let people in to see them, but there's some U.S. government funding for it. They do it outside the U.S. where it's legal. And the question is, do these chimpanzees that are now part human have rights? And, of course, if they're doing it for organ harvesting. They've got pigs that I remember 12 years ago, BBC, that are part human that grow human hearts, and they're testing them. You know, the issue here is, what do you think all this mad science splicing is going to do? Well, there are already cases of oak trees in the U.S. with corn growing out of the side of them from GMO. Just corn stalks start growing out of the ends of the oak buds. There are all sorts of, because once you scramble a plant's DNA, when it puts its pollen out and has now widened its genome, it can cross-pollinate, not in a hybridization with plants similar to it, its same family. That's natural. You've now got a plant with fungus, pesticide that grows at 1,000 times normal levels inside of it, or that has insect genes, or that's pharmacological, thousands of those crops. Protegene came out with one that had HIV in the corn. AP 2002 planted it open air in several areas of the U.S. until the government found out and made them burn it. I mean, I could go on for 10 hours. And anything I say, you can just Google the term I use, and it'll come right up mainstream news. But never telling you it's dangerous. So, of course, there's all these companies and universities and labs looking at nanotech within the body and injecting it in people that are part of trials. I mean, the government has tacitly admitted that Lyme's disease was a Nazi invention, weaponized Lyme's disease, admittedly run by Nazis at Plum Island. The head of the Nazi bioweapons system was brought there, and that deer, because it's not too far away from the East Coast coastline, when deer start starving, they'll swim miles, swam in with the Lyme's disease, and then now we have that. Also that the West Nile came from Plum Island. I mean, you know about the government injecting black people with syphilis, but now it comes out they're injecting people all over the world with syphilis. The UN's been caught. Adding to the doctor's Salk polio vaccine a live cancer virus knowingly. It's estimated by the U.S. government, pull it up, that over 100 million Americans from the 1950s until the latest numbers that came out a few years ago died from what were previously unknown or rare cancers. They describe some of the cancers as like purple yogurt pouring out of the nose. Cancers in the sinus. I mean, just listing hundreds of these things. And so, they're testing nanotech injected into the body that grows little strands. Jeepers creepers. Other scientists have found citizens in the last decade with this all over the world that have it, and that's exactly what the scientists said they thought it was. And then magically, it turns out there's a whole class of research going on for decades. Let's inject people with nanotech. Do you realize that almost every corn variety in Latin America, some of them thousands of years old, has been infected by the GMO crops? The entire system is being butchered and assaulted and attacked. See, I said I'd cover this later in the show. And I will get to it more in the third hour. That is one article out of no exaggeration. I've got to have 50 or 60 here in front of me.